Hello and welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob. Today we have a special guest who is a YouTuber, and his name is Stavros Greer from TorontoSportsGuy. Nice to having you on to the podcast.
Hey Jacob, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
So talk about your YouTube channel.
Yeah, so Toronto Sports Guy on YouTube. I've been around for about 5 years now. If you guys anything CPL, Canadian soccer, Canadian national team, Toronto FC especially, I'm basically all about that. Game reviews, player transfers, as quick as I find out about them, I'm there. You got my reaction, you got my thoughts. So, if you want a more in-depth look at Toronto FC, Canadian national team, Canadian Premier League, look me up.
Yeah, and also to anyone who's listening, hope you subscribe to him. He's a great shout out to him. I think to be honest, I've seen his YouTube channel, but to be honest, the one that really shocked me about your channel was when you made a vlog on the first ever Canadian Premier League match.
Yeah, that's a throwback right there. That was so many years ago, but that was one of my first videos to pass 1,000 views. That was a great video to make, and so much fun to do that one.
So it was one of the most viewed.
Yes, it was. Well, at the time, it was one of the most viewed videos I've ever made. I've surpassed that on several occasions now.
Okay, so to anyone who is also wanting to see about the CONCACAF Champions Cup, here are your fixtures rundowns from the second leg of one of the matches. Tigres defeated Whitecaps 3-0 in aggregate, comes to 4-1. Tigres will move on to the next round. Club America beats Real Madrid 2-0, and the final aggregate score was 3-2. Club America will advance to the next round. Toluca loses to Herediano 2-3. Aggregate final score is 4-4. Herediano wins at away goals. They move on. What a big upset there. Monterrey wins to the Guatemala team Comunicaciones. Monterrey 3-0. And the aggregate score is 7-1. What a blowout for Monterrey. Moving on, Chivas beats Forge FC 2-1. Final aggregate score 5-2. So, what do you think about the first round so far, which is the first half of the first round? What do you think about that?
First round's been great. I think it's about what we've expected. The Mexican teams were always going to be dominant in this first round, especially against like the lower ranked Central American CPL opposition, MLS team in the Vancouver Whitecaps that is just fresh off the preseason versus a strong Tigres side in the middle of their season. Like, this is a tournament that's always been set up for the Mexican teams to succeed. Big props to Herediano. Massive win, great comeback win over Toluca. Always great to see a smaller team getting a victory against the Mexican Giants.
Yeah, also right now, we're not seeing the MLS teams yet. Right now, Independente will be versing New England Revolution. St. Louis City SC will be versing Houston Dynamo. Calgary FC later will be versing Orlando City SC. Vancouver Whitecaps, as noticed, they've been eliminated there. Cavalier, the Jamaican team, will be versing FC Cincinnati. And Mocha, the Dominican Republic team, will be versing Nashville SC. So what really stands out, we finally now have our first Canadian Premier League team that's been eliminated. Our second Canadian Premier League team is now versing the big MLS team, Orlando City SC. What do you think about the upcoming match that's coming in a few days?
Yeah, no, that Cavalry Orlando match is one I'm a lot more excited for. as a Forge fan, I'm saying I'm a lot more excited for that match than I was for Forge versus Chivas. Now, like Forge versus Chivas, it was always going to be a tough run for Forge. Forge had lost a lot of their starting players. They were playing a Chivas team in mid-season form. It was going to be rough. Cavalry against Orlando, this is a matchup where like Cavalry has kept most of their squad from last season. Cavalry has added a couple players to their squad from last season. They don't have the gaps in their lineup, the holes in their lineup that Forge did. And they're going up against an Orlando team that's also in preseason form, an Orlando team that also hasn't played a competitive fixture yet. So like if there was going to be a CPL team to advance in this tournament, everything is far better set up for Cavalry to do it than Forge were. The one knock against Cavalry that doesn't give them the full like capability and the full advantages they should have is the fact that they're playing their home leg at Starlight in Langford because, you know, all the weather in Alberta and they couldn't get Commonwealth and a whole bunch of stuff. But if they can overcome that, and they are playing in a stadium that like they've played in 2 times a season, so like it still is a bit more of an advantage for them than Orlando playing in that stadium. Cavalry very well could do it. Like they could pull off the upset here. I think that's definitely a matchup to watch.
Yeah, and also right now that it is a team that will be the final Canadian team that's competing, and it is a bummer. I do think I feel sorry about Calvary FC not being at home. They're going to be playing in the purple colors, which is Pacific FC's home field, and as noticed, Orlando City SC wearing the purple, kind of some disadvantages you would think if you have the colors there.
Yeah, the Orlando players are gonna look around based off of the colors. It's gonna look like a home game for them, and I really do feel bad for the Cavalry fans. Like I said, they deserved it. They deserved CONCACAF football from season 1. Cavalry has deserved CONCACAF football. They were robbed of not playing in the CONCACAF League in 2019, and I was so happy that Cavalry fans are finally going to get a chance to experience CONCACAF football, and they unfortunately still cannot do that because of the location of the games. Like I feel so bad for the Cavalry fans. Like this is a huge knock to them, but hopefully Cavalry can get the win here. So that the next round, it's a bit more favorable for them to possibly play at Atco Field in Calgary.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough for some of the owners for the Atco Field. It might think of them thinking maybe we should upgrade the field and maybe the stadium of the attendees when they're going to be making the CONCACAF Champions Cup and some renovations there. I think that it would maybe sooner or later think of making a soccer specific field for them.
Yeah. I just hope they keep the grass in, man. Like that's going to be the one grass field left in the Canadian Premier League after Halifax builds their stadium. And like, it's great for that reason. And I know, especially in Calgary and especially for like tournaments like this, a turf field would probably allow them to play in this tournament and allow them to play earlier in the season. But I really hope they keep the grass and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, even for example, that we are seeing a new stadium coming in Halifax. They're not going to keep the grass. They're going to have a new field for themselves. And I think a lot of Halifax Wanderers fans rather have to keep the actual grass. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I know a lot of, I saw a lot of Halifax fans, a lot of CPL fans in general, were not happy that the field was going to be switched to turf from grass if that Halifax stadium does get built. But I mean, like in the end, a big selling point of that turf is that it's going to be used for multiple things, not just the Wanderers. And so like, that's the one problem you see with the grass fields is that like, they're great, but you can't really have multiple teams across multiple sports playing on them and like multiple teams practicing on them. Look at BMO Field, which is like the most expensive grass. BMO Field is the most expensive plot of grass in the entire country, and it can't handle the Argos and TFC on it at the same time. So for like these multi-purpose stadiums, they're gonna have multiple teams on them. It just makes more sense to have the turf, unfortunately.
Yeah, and BMO Field is hybrid grass that they use, and maybe some of the owners should maybe try to use hybrid, since they have, for example, Forge FC, where Tim Hortons field is. Maybe they should think of doing hybrid, since they now have a soccer team, they have a football team, the Canadian Football League, and maybe other ones. Maybe from Prince Motorfield could be a good one, because they have the Blue Bombers, and now they have Valor FC. But it's gonna get there for it, and it's really expensive for hybrid grass. But Toronto FC has it, and hoping the best for it. And I love how Halifax Wanderers is now going to get their stadium by 2025, and maybe Halifax Wanderers will be a good team to make it. I hope that one of the times Halifax Wanderers might get to the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but there's a lot of teams for the upcoming season will be actually good for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Atletico Ottawa also. That's a team to watch for the upcoming season. What do you think about that?
Oh, Atletico Ottawa is building a monster of a team. They've brought back Balou Tabla, man. That is just right off the bat right there. Like, that's the guy who was missing from the equation last season for them. Bringing back him, getting Yesley in net. So many good moves made by Atletico Ottawa. If they get Manny Aparicio, it's like game over. They are right there neck and neck with Cavalry for the regular season title. If they bring in Aparicio, I think right now Cavalry's still just a touch ahead, but man, Ottawa has gotten close.
Yeah, and then still more to come for them. They have other signings to come, and it's going to be a big banger if Manny Aparicio's going to actually sign with Atletico Ottawa. There's also been news of he might go to Vancouver Whitecaps and also Toronto FC, but there's still a pause on that. Right now, there has already been news already. Halifax Wanderers is already no longer interested in Manny Aparicio, and still Atletico Ottawa is still willing to pay him, and he's going to be the most paid player in the CPL.
Yeah, potentially up to, I read, 10% of Ottawa's salary budget could potentially go to just Aparicio. And I mean, he is a fantastic player. He's been highlight reel material since day one in the CPL. So, like, he turns any team he's on into an automatic contender. And Ottawa's already really good. So that would be a match made in heaven.
Yeah, he might be the Canadian Lionel Messi at this point.
Boba Booley might have something to say about that.
Or, yeah, even Balou Tabla, for example. Question mark.
And oh yeah, Tabla, Borges, if he gets his spark back from season one. Like, Aparicio is probably one of the best players to never win a Player of the Year award though in the CPL.
Yeah, and not just this, we're talking about players. Aphlonso Davies maybe going to Real Madrid, but right now stuck with an injury with Bayern Munich, closing into the deal of an announcement of Real Madrid. What do you think about this big announcement?
Davies and Real Madrid is the combination that you keep hearing about. And like, they are basically one of the only teams in the world that can afford him. If he was going to move from Bayern, it would have to be either to a Real Madrid or like a Manchester City or like a top-end Premier League team. It's one or the other. And I think Real Madrid makes the most sense for him. And it just would elevate just the presence of Canadian soccer so much, because like Bayern Munich, they're a great team. They massive fan base all over the world, like very well-known team. But Real Madrid is just like a step above. Everyone knows who plays for Real Madrid. If you're a regular starter for Real Madrid, you are a global like phenomenon. And to have a Canadian on that lineup would be such a boost to the Canadian national team and such a like boost to the presence of Canadian soccer that it would be absolutely massive, especially if, if he can go there, stay healthy, win potentially another 2, 3 Champions Leagues. Like, we have a guy who could, in the end, if he like forges out a career for himself in Real Madrid, makes that move, forges out a career for himself there, he could end up as probably like one of, if not the most famous Canadian athlete ever.
Yeah, and not just that, that he's won some of the Champions Cup. He also won the FIFA Club World Cup.
He did do that as well. Yes. Not the it's probably, that tournament will probably be a bit more prestigious, I'd hope, once we get the full 32 team version starting in 2025. And I think if he stays at Bayern or Real Madrid, whichever one he's at, he's going to be in that tournament regardless. So that'll be exciting too if he could win the inaugural version of the massive Club World Cup. But he does already have a Club World Cup to his name as well, on top of a Champions League. He's like already so decorated at such a young age, and he has the opportunity to go to Real Madrid, win La Liga, win more Champions Leagues, play for the most famous football team in the world. The sky is quite literally the limit for Aphlonso Davies right now.
Yeah, and I always just question is every single time that these sources come out when there's Aphlonso Davies going to Real Madrid every single time, it doesn't really actually happen. And then later you figure out it's the time that maybe Aphlonso Davies is going to actually go to Real Madrid. But what if it actually doesn't actually happen? And there's another team who's really interested. It might be maybe Barcelona, for example, maybe some actual good team like Manchester City, or maybe other big teams. That is really one of the question marks. If Real Madrid would just actually, even the transfer fee, that it doesn't go by.
Yeah. Well, I think like with a guy like Aphlonso Davies, the guy who at that age, who's already like, been a starting player for Bayern Munich for so long, won that many trophies, the number of teams that you can go to from Bayern Munich, like the number of teams that can just straight up afford you, is so small in such an elite group. With the exception of PSG, it doesn't really matter which one you go to, because all of them are just world-renowned clubs that win everything. And I put an asterisk next to PSG because they haven't won a Champions League yet, and the French league is considered a step down from the Bundesliga. But any other club he could possibly go to is a bigger domestic league in the global image, and it would be a team that's playing consistent Champions League football, a team that's consistently a contender to win the Champions League. So it doesn't have to be Real Madrid. I mean, he can stay at Bayern Munich for another 5 years and he's still world-renowned global superstar. He can go to Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, be world-renowned global superstar. It does, like, at this point, like, he's just in such a great position and where he is, because either he stays at Bayern Munich and he's at a world-class club, or he goes to another world-class club. Like, there's no situation where he goes to a lower prestige club at this point.
Yeah, but to be honest, he is good where he is, but as noticed that his dream is to go to Real Madrid, as is always he said in his whole time. And yeah, Real Madrid does have a great history in championships. That is something that everyone's career is. And you have one of the biggest name players, Zidane. You had David Beckham. You have like a big cast of big name players that have played with Real Madrid. And if Aphlonso Davies goes to Real Madrid, he's the first Canadian player. And that is a big, astonishing for Canadian fans. And it will be more popular to watch Real Madrid for Canadians. It's the audience for Canada.
Yeah, no, I guarantee. Like, I completely agree. Like, Real Madrid is the biggest possible move he could get, and it's just like it's so massive if he does get that move for Canada soccer as a whole. Just the eyes on him and the attention that would I even like garner within Canada would be just massive.
Yeah, and if Aphlonso Davies makes it, it's all on him on during the where his position is. So not just also where he is going to be, the whole eyes on him. It is also the whole eyes on for OneSoccer now getting the rights for the 2024 season for the Canadian Premier League. And the question it's always on what actually happened. We heard well, we lost the Canadian rights and now they're back.
Well, I don't think they're fully back per se. I think that there hasn't been anything about the national team rights, so I feel like the national teams are definitely still up for grabs after OneSoccer, our Media Pro defaulted on I think it was half the payments they owed the CSB for 2023. It's for the so we know now that they're going to be the broadcaster for the Canadian Premier League, and like to be honest, that's always been the best possible situation for the CPL. Like a lot of people wanted the CPL to end up on Sportsnet or TSN. That wasn't going to happen. There's no reason why Sportsnet or TSN would pick up the Canadian Premier League. It doesn't have a significant audience. It would cost them a ton of money to go and produce all these games. You needed someone who would be willing to pay the production fees on all that. And like Media Pro already has all that infrastructure set up and there in all these cities that the Canadian Premier League play in. And they also like have the channel that's on Fubo, that's on TELUS. Like I know it's not on, you can't get it on Rogers Cable, you can't get it on Bell Cable, but like it's on Fubo. And if you watch the Premier League, like the English Premier League in Canada, you have Fubo. So that's not a terrible system to be, like that's not a terrible platform to be on. It's more so too that like I think it just like there's not enough time until the season starts for the CPL to like figure out or make their own broadcaster. And for once, honestly, FC Edmonton's strategy might have actually been good, because FC Edmonton, a big part of why they folded was in the year before they joined the Canadian Premier League, they spent all this money on their own in-house production service to broadcast their own games. And then Media Pro came in and like all that money was spent on quite literally nothing. But now, you know, if that was still set up, FC Edmonton would have been in a really good place had this deal fallen through. And like, for example, had they allowed the individual teams in the CPL to go and find their own individual TV deals, at least locally. But it makes a lot of sense that OneSoccer is back for the CPL. I mean, it's the cheapest option. And for Media Pro, I mean, if they still want to broadcast something and they still have all the stuff in Canada set up to do it, so they might as well do it and get the subscription fees for the year. So like for a short-term solution, it makes sense for Media Pro to keep doing the CPL and keep doing OneSoccer for this season. And then while that's going on in the background, the CPL can go and potentially work out a new media deal outside of OneSoccer for the future.
Yeah. The whole controversy about it was that it started with the previous commissioner, David Cloudkin, which was a crazy deal that it had to go up to mostly like up to 12 teams for the Canadian Premier League. And now they didn't, it has to be all the way by like 2024, I think it was. And the whole thing went down during the pandemic. And now we had this, and we had our new commissioner, and I was questioning about this this whole deal. Why didn't the new commissioner sign a new agreement for this? That was a question mark. with the whole
Yeah.
negotiation.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is my personal thought process is that 12 team by 2024 figure that or 14 team by 2024 figure, whatever it was, that Media Pro or OneSoccer posted in their like clap back response to the CPL's original response or original statement. That number seemed so weird for me. I like even back in the beginning, like the CPL was marketing to fans as saying that they were planning to expand to that many teams by 2024 to 2026. I don't believe for a second that they ever would have actually put in writing that they were going to do that. And even if they did, with the whole pandemic years like slowing the growth of the league and no one was looking to invest in a soccer league and a soccer team in 2020 and 2021, I also like don't believe that unless they were put under duress that OneSoccer would think it was beneficial to bring up that clause, because like obviously things changed and the growth of the league was slowed. Like you can pretty much take out those 2 seasons. It was great that the league played in 2020 and 2021. Great that the league survived in 2020 and 2021. But you can essentially remove those 2 seasons as like real seasons the league played if you want to look at like the proper development of the league. And you could almost also say that like 2019 almost was kind of taken away as the first season because of those 2 years, because like immediately the next year, like a lot of people probably forgot the league existed who had gone to games and whatnot. So like really the league in its current form and in its current development has like been around for 2 years since that happened. And so the development definitely and growth of the league definitely slowed down. So to bring in that number now is just seemed insane to me that they'd bring that number up of having 12 to 14 teams by 2024, because like logically there's no world where that makes any realistic sense.
Yeah, and I want to actually question you about this. Have you ever met someone and told, have you heard about the Canadian Premier League?
I've asked a lot of people that question.
And I also talk about this question. I always ask this question. Have you heard about this team? Have you heard about this league? They don't know what the Canadian Premier League is. And that's the biggest problem. And we have a big problem. And it's not just that. Even Toronto FC fans don't even know that there's a Canadian Premier League. They don't even know that there's a Canadian Premier League team called York United. And that really is like shocking that if there's some teams up north. Yeah, and I always think about even the fans that actually live in Hamilton. They don't even know that there was a team in Hamilton. It's like shocker. How can you not know that you have a soccer team in Hamilton? You only know the Ticats?
So when I went to I lived in Edmonton for 2 years, in 2021, 2022, and I met a guy who in 2022 lived quite literally a 5-minute walk from Clark Stadium. And I was talking about how I was going to go see a FC Edmonton game, and he didn't even know that Edmonton had a soccer team. He lived 5-minute walk from the stadium. It's insane, just like how little market penetration the CPL actually has. Because there are a lot of people who would definitely go to a game or two a season. They just legitimately do not know about the league.
It's just like saying, oh, yeah, like FC Edmonton plays just right where the Elks played.
It's literally next door. Like you can see the stadiums from each other.
Yeah, it's so shocking that when you hear Canadian soccer fans that still don't know, are still trying to get into this development of what is the Canadian Premier League and process it. Oh, I never knew that. I never knew we had a professional league. I thought it was just a Major League Soccer, which is not. It's not a Canadian or American. It's part of the U.S. soccer, which is in a closed system, though. And to be honest, I hope that Canadian Premier League gets the popularity from the Canadian soccer fans, and it's really supported by the supporter groups. So, yeah, I've been in at this point. I've been into Halifax Wanderer games. I've went to York United games. I even went. My first match was even at the Forge FC, and I hope that it gets more popular. I do see that the Canadian Premier League has a great potential, and or say has a good competitive with other leagues.
Yeah, I think it definitely has all the potential there, and I think like tying back to the OneSoccer Media Pro deal, it's like you need almost for these small leagues, you need like 2 tiers of viewing. You need your like streaming service for the hardcore fans, because the big companies, you're not going to get every game broadcast on TV. Even if you get on TSN, they're not going to broadcast all 4 games every weekend. But to grow the league, you do need like once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month at least. You need to have a game just on some known platform, just to like have that market penetration. Because like, think about how many people know about the National Lacrosse League, right? For a league that averages like 10,000 people attendance, because there is a National Lacrosse League on every week on TSN. Now there's 7-8 National Lacrosse League games a week, and only one of them is on TSN. But that's just enough that people are aware that it exists.
Yeah, and as noticed that the National Lacrosse League, like for example, the Toronto Rock, they used to play in the Scotiabank Arena. Now they relocated themselves just where Hamilton is.
And that Toronto Rock played it.
Yeah, it's just question. I've searched up. I always question where did Toronto Rock located, and they told me they are actually where Hamilton plays. Like,
yeah, they're in the First Ontario Center in Hamilton. Great, weird thing.
It is weird, actually. And I think it was just like it didn't gain that much popularity of the attendees, and it also had a schedule situation in Scotiabank Arena, so it did have some issues for the Toronto Rock. And I know that there is going to be, and by the way, about the broadcasting, in the first ever season, it was on CBC. You mentioned about TSN. You also, for example, the Sportsnet started from CBC, and then even, for example, on the streaming site OneSoccer. And I do question this. If the Canadian Premier League made a deal with a broadcast channel, what do you think that it would mostly be better for?
Well, it's all about the visibility, right? I mean, here's the thing too, is that like, it's not just that the games are on the channel. It's that if they made a deal, especially Sportsnet or TSN, like they fill up their time in the morning and the daytime shows with, like, you know, their Sports Centers, plays of the months, missed plays of the months, all that, right? But anyone who's watched those shows know that those channels hype up the leagues that they have the rights to in those shows. Like TSN on highlights of the year, like the top 100 plays of the year, they'll throw in a lot of CFL plays. And it's to hype up the CFL that they own the rights to. They'll throw in National Lacrosse League plays to hype up the National Lacrosse League that they hold the rights to. And so it's more so that, like, it's not just the having the game on the channel. It's that you theorize the channel would be more willing to advertise that league and have, maybe not full segments, but, like a brief highlight clip of the league in their like sports centers and their morning shows and their plays of the months and all that, just to like have visibility of what in the end is a product that they have. And that's a lot of how sports get, like, that's a lot of the Canadian sports market right now, is it's what these channels have the rights to and what they promote because they have the rights to them. So if they somehow made a deal to get on one of those channels, the visibility would be massive all around.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the broadcasting, and there was actually another competitor for it, and it was like the Canadian Elite Basketball League. Started also from CBC, and then later TSN gets the rights. So that was a big one. That and then you have the Canadian Premier League, started from CBC Sports, and no one there to have the broadcast rights. So it's really slow for them to try to get broadcast rights.
Yeah, I still think the biggest benefit of OneSoccer is that it's on Fubo. But I get, then again, like Fubo, besides the hardcore fans who want to watch Premier League games, people don't have it. And like I think that's part of the problem just with soccer as a whole in Canada right now. Is like no one actually has soccer rights that does anything else. Like Champions League and Bundesliga are on DAZN, and I guess you get like NFL season pass on DAZN, but like TSN plays NFL games and whatnot. So like I don't know if people are buying DAZN specifically for the NFL. I'm sure some people are in Canada, but it's also just like, because it's not something you just throw on, you have to specifically go and find the game you want. It's caused like a decrease in the level of, I guess, general visibility of soccer as a whole, even for the big leagues. Same with Fubo, like the Premier League games not being on Sportsnet anymore and now being on Fubo is a decrease in like just general visibility of soccer as a whole. Like this is not a problem that's exclusive to Canadian soccer, exclusive to the Canadian Premier League. It's all soccer in Canada, because like, sure, these streaming services, Fubo, if you're a soccer fan like I am, I think Fubo is great because I get the Premier League, I get the French League, I get all the CONCACAF competitions and OneSoccer and all that all in one place. For me, it serves its purpose very, very well. But if you're just a casual fan who's not going to go and drop $150, $200 a year on a streaming service that mostly just shows soccer, you're never going to see soccer again. You're not even going to see the English Premier League again. You're not even going to see the Champions League again. So even like the top end leagues in the world are facing a visibility problem in Canada because of like the way this streaming service setup has panned out. Even MLS, you don't have as many games on TSN anymore. You get like a third of TFC season, the rest is on Apple Season Pass, which you're only going to buy exclusively to see MLS games. So like they serve their purpose very well if you're already a fan of the product. And this is the thing that I've always wondered about these streaming services is how does someone who's not a determined fan of the product, how does someone that's not an existing fan of the product before you move to these streaming services find the product and become a fan of the product? Because like I found Chelsea FC and became a fan of Chelsea FC because they were on Sportsnet, and now I pay for Fubo so I can watch all these Premier League games. But how does someone who's growing up now, whose parents don't have Fubo and aren't putting Fubo TV on every day, every weekend to watch Premier League in their house, how are they going to find out and start watching this league and become a fan of this league? It's great if you're a predetermined fan because everything's in one place and you can pick whatever game you want. But to discover the league, these streaming services kind of suck.
Yeah. Even you mentioned about the whole Major League Soccer and the situation of streaming and broadcasting. Now there's a situation. I know I want to bring this up. Is a situation on the U.S. Open Cup. the whole thing for the U.S. soccer is also a situation, and it's always going to bring that, always going to bring so many things that Major League Soccer is now having a problem with their own U.S. Open Cup.
Yeah. The US Open Cup is in crisis because MLS decided to do the Leagues Cup, and now they have too many games and they can't fit into their schedule.
And I brought this up. I always brought this up about Major League Soccer. There, if you bring in too many competitions that you bring up, like for example the Campeones, I was like, it was the first time that, well, who was the one who started it was like Toronto FC and the Tigres once, and then later you figure out, well, it's going to be dominated by Liga MX teams that are going to win. But and then Atlanta United won the first were the first MLS team to win the Campeones, and then you have the Leagues Cup, which I think it was, to me, just a rip off of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and I really didn't like it. And I really think that the CONCACAF should look back and saying this is bad for continental competition, and it makes more, and the prize money is more than the CONCACAF Champions Cup. The prize, why? I just think to this, why view the audience to Liga MX versus MLS, and then later your full schedule, you don't want to verse other American leagues in the US Open Cup, and Major League Soccer, I really don't get it, why they have so much voting power in this situation.
Well, MLS is just a big closed system. They are, all the owners, like, because of the way the expansion fees work in MLS, and because of the way, like, you're spending $600 million for a team, you're not doing that to risk the team getting relegated. You're not doing that to risk the team and like falling out in standing. And the league is single entity, and it acts like a single entity. Although, like, for as much as all the teams like to throw FC at the end of their name and say they're a football club, the entire league is a single entity. The players' contracts are with the league; they're not with the individual teams. That's why they can get traded. It's all it's all set up so that everything is a single machine organism that works together. And it does not like any competition, and it does not like anything outside of its own single entity. I'm sure if MLS teams, the only reason why MLS teams even probably like haven't made a fuss about the Champions League, or the Champions Cup now, sorry, is the expanded Club World Cup is very beneficial for them to have a MLS team or multiple MLS teams in there, especially 2025. The first edition of that expanded Club World Cup is in the United States. I'm sure if it was up to MLS, they'd want the winner of the Leagues Cup to get that spot in the CONCACAF Champions, or in the Club World Cup. But it has to go through FIFA, and so it has to go through CONCACAF. And that, to me, is the only reason why they haven't tried to pull out of that tournament as well. They just don't like what makes football beautiful. They don't like the interconnectedness of it. They don't like how you can build up from nothing into a world-class team and play against other teams from around the world. They want to be their own closed system. They want something that's like the NFL or the NBA, where it's just completely self-contained.
Yeah, and not just that, and not just this. The Canadian Championship. What if it was, and it has this situation. We never heard about anything else. They're still negotiating with a good deal with also the Major League Soccer teams, the 3 Canadian Major League Soccer teams, with a better situation. And that really is a problem right now for Canadian Championship
Yeah, well, the Canadian Championship's almost a completely different basket of eggs than the U.S. Open Cup. I think like the U.S. Open Cup, the lower ranked teams love it, and the MLS teams don't. The problem with the Canadian Championship is with only 3 MLS teams, there's no real guarantee, or a lot less of a guarantee, of the CPL teams playing against MLS teams. Most of them just play against each other and get eliminated. Only a select few get to play against the MLS teams. So there's a lot less like financial benefit of being able to bring a MLS team into like Hamilton or into Calgary or whatever. And so it makes it a lot more expensive of an endeavor for the CPL teams. And so like I remember like the first negotiation with the new Canadian Championship was the CPL wanted a even more regionalized than it already was bracket. Like they wanted basically a predetermined bracket based off of geographic teams locations in the first round to lower travel as much as possible. So you got the CPL being cheap, and you have the MLS teams all, you know, not saying anything because they're kind of hiding behind what's going on at the US Open Cup. But you get the feeling, and I'd imagine that to add to the US Open Cup, the Canadian MLS teams probably don't want to do the Canadian Championship either. So those two things combined are kind of putting the Canadian Championship on thin ice for this season. Now, I think the CPL teams should say screw the costs and just do it because they need to. Like it's a great opportunity for them, especially if the MLS teams have an issue with that. Then it's a win for the CPL. It makes the MLS look like the bad guy, and it brings more purists to the CPL. I don't think this season, when there's that whole drama going on with the US Open Cup and the MLS teams in the US Open Cup, I don't think this is the right season for the CPL teams to try and be cheap with the Canadian Championship. I think they should have waited at least one more year and seen what the Canadian MLS teams did before they tried to be cheap. Because right now there's just so much going on with this Canadian Championship. And like, I mean, the tournament's not going to start until April. Like there's still, we can get an announcement in a month from now. Like it'll still happen. I don't see it not happening, but there definitely is a lot of stuff that needs to be figured out there. I just kind of hope I wish the CPL had delayed a year before they tried to pull this we want a easier travel format thing, at least so we could see what was going on with the MLS clubs on their own without there being both the MLS and the CPL clubs having a story with this Canadian Championship.
Yeah, and hoping that everything goes well in this whole situation and everything goes smoothly. And that is full time on the Red Leaf Card. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.